without further ado, I'd like to say a fast hello to our publisher and editor-in-chief, Meredith May. Good morning, Meredith.
Good morning, and good morning to all you Somm Zoomers out there. We're about to go on a Somm journey to the Southern Hemisphere where it's summertime. I bet that makes you feel a little bit warmer.
Amen. It'll make the New Yorker and me feel warmer. I think I'm the coldest one here, certainly the most bundled up.
All right. Well, this is going to be a great education show today, and the recap article will be in the March 2021 issue of the Somm Journal. So if you miss anything today, of course, it'll be recorded, but you'll see it in print in our magazine. Great.
And the recording will also be available on sommjournal.com through SommGo, through SommCon, as well as our YouTube channel. So you can find us.
Right. And a special shout out to National Geographic Books. Thank you so much for being our partner.
And what partners they are, Meredith. My understanding is through their generosity today, everybody who's listening, the first 5 essays that I receive at sommjournal.com, short essays. Give us a little recap, a few words about what you got out of this and how it might help you in your daily activities, your job. First person to do that little recap, to send it to me at lars@sommjournal.com.
5. We're going to give away 5 books.
Exactly. 5 of these gorgeous books. I think the postage alone is going to be worth the price of admission.
That's right. It costs as much to send. It's a beautiful book. It's got all custom maps. These maps were made just for this book. It's been edited and written by some of the best wine minds in the world. So that's Lars at Somm Journal. You don't have to make it a long essay. Just kind of tell us what you got out of this webinar. Thanks, Lars.
All right. Thank you, guys. So we're going to get rolling right in because I'm hoping that, not only are we going to traverse the Southern Hemisphere, but we're actually going to traverse the day, because we're going to be traveling from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. right now through the timelines that we're crossing. And that's a lot of fun. And the first speaker he gets the prize for the earliest arisen, the earliest waking. And that's Julian Grounds, from the chief winemaker from Craggy Range in New Zealand. Julian's actually a native Australian. And he's worked in Australia and New Zealand. He's got over 10 years of experience, which, looking at you, Julian, I think that means you must have started when you were 8.
Thereabouts, Lars. Yeah.
I know that one of your big focuses is on sustainability and, of course, Sauvignon Blanc. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on what sustainability means to you in Craggy Range, and how New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is different and special, and especially how you're doing it in Martinborough. So please, Julian, talk to us.
Absolutely, and good morning from, it's now the sun's up, and I think, as you mentioned, one of the only ones that's bundled up at the moment, Lars. So, yeah, so just to jump straight into who we are, I'm just going to share this screen here. So,
beautiful.
So Craggy Range was basically came about in the mid-90s when the Peabody family, who are based in Australia, had ambitions to start a winery somewhere in the world, and it explored mainly through the countries of Australia, United States, and then ultimately New Zealand, for a place to begin their wine business, and with the ambition of ultimately creating a wine that would sit on the world stage comfortably. So it wasn't about creating the best wine on the world or what have you, but about a wine that would speak of a place and sit in those conversations. And they were avid eaters in fine restaurants, and loved the idea that you could drink this wine from a place and it would really resonate as to where it came from. So as you can see, there's quite a picturesque, typical New Zealand picture that we have there, and that's in the Hawke's Bay region with the Tomato Peak sitting in the background. So we did explore all over the country, and ultimately we happened to meet a gentleman by the name of Steve Smith, Master of Wine, and viticultural. It was the first viticultural master of wine coming from New Zealand, and we ultimately decided to settle on two regions. So Hawke's Bay and Martinborough for our major planting. So Hawke's Bay, as you can see there on the east coast of the North Island, and Martinborough, which is just near our nation's capital of Wellington. And the reason we chose those two regions in particular, and we've got Marlborough there as a reference point because I'm sure most of you are familiar with the wines of Marlborough, and we'll probably talk about in relationship to Sauvignon later. But Martinborough is where we went for our planting of Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc in particular. And then Hawke's Bay, where we settled for Syrah and Bordeaux Reds. And at that time, the plantings of both Bordeaux Reds and Syrah and Chardonnay was quite low in New Zealand. So this was, I suppose, a bit of a journey that we were going to take to explore the possibility of this region. And if we started at Hawke's Bay, we planted these two vineyards. The first on the coast there is the Kidnappers Vineyard, which we'll talk about in relation to Chardonnay. But I wanted to start by talking about the Gimlet Gravels because it's a fascinating region or a sub-region of the Greater Hawke's Bay region, and really speaks of a typicity of terroir that only comes from this minute part of New Zealand. And this is an over image of the Gimlet Gravels. So this is our vineyard, which is about 105 hectares. And right down the bottom of the screen there, you can see what looks like a kind of alluvial bed, and that's actually the Northern River that about 150 years ago changed its path. So where all that vineyard was actually a river previous to this point, and it deposited the river stones, and ultimately the entire area, which is now 800 hectares, that we define as the Gimlet Gravels, became a gravel bed of these. They're about 6 million years old, and that's the fascinating thing about New Zealand is it's actually geologically very young. And I'm thinking it'd be interesting to hear the other panelists that we talk, but I'm thinking that New Zealand is probably the youngest as a viticultural country in terms of the soils, and it is still very much moving and changing and emerging from the ground. But the gravel points on the Gimlet Gravels, they basically, after the river changed its path, we got this gravel, which you can see here is a soil pit under some Syrah vines that goes for about 40 metres deep. And there is literally no defined hard pans or soil types. It's just this loose sandstone gravel and this silt. And because the river was imperfect when it washed away, we get some portions which are really high in gravel and some which have a bit more silt. And for me, that's really important because the varieties of Syrah and Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon that are not traditionally varieties that people would associate achieving a level of ripeness and intensity outside of some of those warmer regions. And Hawke's Bay is sunny, but it is definitely not hot or warm climate. It's kind of moderate to cool. And for us, it's these gravels, which is key because of the refraction of heat. So the retention of heat during the day and then refracting up through the canopy, but also to stimulate the root growth, keep the roots moving through the winter, and then also the free draining nature of them. So when we do get any rain events, we notice that any rain that comes quickly drains away, and they are very low yielding. So for us on these gravels, we are of a higher density. That's really key because we don't have that vigor that probably people associate with Marlborough or more of those Sauvignons. But the great thing about that for me is that we get really intense grapes, and we're growing at about 1 kilo per vine on this density. Here's quite a picturesque image showing us our coastal vineyard, which is just planted out with Chardonnay. So when you look out there, we're probably looking at some of our other panelists out to the east of the world there. But you know, and this is a lot more of this kind of clay type, but very mineral driven Chardonnay out here as well. It's a moderate to low alcohol level that we're able to get Chardonnay at the ripeness there. And I find the style is much more in that lemon to citrus, which really does kind of tie in with that style of Sauvignon that we get from Martinborough. And that is the wine that we're kind of looking at tonight, the Tamuna Sauvignon. And we'll head down there to Tamuna now. So this is Martinborough, and this is a shot of our vineyard down in Martinborough. So Martinborough is about an hour east of our nation's capital in Wellington on the south coast. And it's extremely cool and exposed to those Arctic winds. And the fascinating thing about New Zealand is it's got no significant landmass to kind of negate any weather. So we don't generate our own heat. It's basically, we're open to all the weather systems that come from the west or the east. And so every wine region outside of Central Otago in New Zealand is actually maritime influence. And Martinborough, which is, it's about half an hour off the coast, really does get the effects of those Antarctic winds, especially during the flowering period. So we've just gone through flowering at the moment. With that, it's extremely windy. And anyone who's had the experience of landing a plane in Wellington, it's quite a hair-raising experience. And so we really do get the lower crops than what would normally be associated for Sauvignon and also for Pinot. And it's actually it's not abundantly clear through that image, but they are very, very clearly defined as two terraces. And again, very young in their soil age. We're talking in this spot, it was basically volcanic and then came to a river that's kind of carved out this piece of the land. And it's only 30,000 years ago for the younger soils of that vineyard. So the Sauvignon, which is down the vines down the bottom, likes the young soil. You see this image here. This is all the Sauvignon plantings down on the bottom terrace that makes up the Tamuna Sauvignon that we've got tonight. So really loves these young soils and high gravel content again. And the reason that we loved Martinborough and why we went there over Marlborough, and we have explored the land of Marlborough, is we really like the salinity, kind of the saline nature of these wines and the mineral nature of their wines and the element of restraint that we get through this Sauvignon. So we do get fruit intensity, but because it is cool and the soils are very, very gravelly, we find that we get this beautiful purist nature to the Sauvignon and an element of restraint that it is really important to us from a wine that can kind of be drunk in restaurant and have that moorishness about it. For the Sauvignon, I do make about for the one wine, it is all single vineyard off this property. When we planted, which was about in the late at 98, 99, we planted about 25 different block sections. So I keep them all separate, and it almost becomes a process of assemblage. So there is a variety of different clones and rootstock combinations, but I do try to keep them separate and then have some which are more acid structure and ones of phenolic structure. Just wanted to highlight here, this is some of the gravels that we do have off that property. So you can see there the kind of sandstone on the inside, and then a beautiful layer of volcanic ash that forms on the outside and becomes quite porous. And there is really, if you look carefully, there are actually roots that will grow in through the volcanic ash. And so we do get really porous nature in these rocks and lots of oxygen. So the vines are extremely happy and for good root growth. Was that the timer going off? Was it last?
That's your timer, Julian. Sorry.
Yeah. No problem.
I hate to cut you off like that, but
that's okay. That last image was just our winery, just so people could see. So.
Fantastic. Congratulations. That was a great in-depth look at part of New Zealand that I had not been familiar with before, and a really good in-depth look at the soils and the climate. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I'm going to ask you to take your share screen. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So now next up is a man who's probably the luckiest one here today because he dodged a bullet. Tim Irwin is GM of Penfolds The Americas. And if he had been broadcasting live from the winery in South Australia, it would be 2 a.m. But he's fortunate enough right now to be based in California, so it's only 9:15. So good morning, Tim.
Hey, Lars, good to be here.
Hey. So please tell us a little bit about Penfolds. And I know you guys have a lot of pride in your house style. So talk to us a little bit about that and how it transverses the different range of beautiful wines that you have.
Yeah, thanks, Lars. It's good to be here. You're probably wondering why I'm in California. We've got a little project going on here, so I just kind of watch this space. But you know, we're obviously the heart and soul of Penfolds is in Australia, and you can see here McGill Estate in Adelaide in South Australia is where it all started 176 years ago. So it was Dr. Christopher Rawson Penfold and his wife Mary, who came from London, Brighton, and came down to Adelaide just after the colony had formed. So, you know, what is a doctor doing with making wine, and his wife starting the winery? Well, it was all for medicinal purposes back then. So if you had anemia or, you know, something like that, the good doctor would prescribe you with some tawnies and fortified. So, you know, that was where the foundation came. And, you know, we've evolved over time, and, you know, you just get a good sense of, you know, 176 years ago with this beautiful image of them building the winery, which is about 10 minutes from the city centre of Adelaide. We have another facility in the Barossa Valley that we started in Nuriukta in 1910. But yeah, real sense of how it was built, the horse and cart. And then today, obviously, it's looking a little bit, it's still the same, still a heritage listed building, but yeah, around the winery is almost suburbs, so a bit of a monopole, if you will, right there in the heart of Adelaide. But it was really this man, Max Schubert, who we'll be talking about a great wine today, Penfolds Bin 389, which is one of the staples in our portfolio. But, you know, he really took the evolution from those tables and fortifieds and brought it to life. And, you know, in the late 1940s, Max was sent to Spain to study sherry and Portugal for port. And then on his way around, went to Bordeaux and tasted the great first growth Bordeaux wines 30, 40, 50 years old. You know, took that knowledge back to Australia with the intention of creating his own first growth Bordeaux. But one of the things to remember back then, you know, table wines weren't as prominent as we're enjoying today. And so access to fruit was a little bit more challenging, but he still had this ambition of creating this great wine. So in 1951, Max created Penfolds Grange. It was an experimental vintage, and the family actually asked him to stop making it after a few vintages, mainly because they didn't understand the style. It was quite big in structure, and it was designed to age, and was asked to stop making it. So you hear of the hidden Granges, 57, 58, and 59, where he was making it in secrecy. You know, to cut a story short, it was the general manager at the time, Geoffrey Penfold Highland, who encouraged Max to keep making, and actually was a member of the family and took it back to them and said, you've got to retaste this wine. So the 1955 is synonymous because it's won a whole bunch of awards and changed the entire Australian wine industry as we think about table wine. And why I tell that story is it really starts with Grange and Max's ambition. So when we think about the portfolio in relation to Bin 389, it starts at the top and everything kind of goes down from there. So Bin 389 is an interesting wine. It was started in 1960. So we're celebrating our 60th release this year. And it's a wine that is often referred to as baby Grange. And the reason for that is old oak used on Grange, American oak, is then transferred down here. But this is truly that house style that you talked about, Lars, that we're trying to get here. So it's multi-regionally sourced. So thinking back to when Max was trying to find Grange, you could only find pockets of Shiraz. There wasn't Cabernet like there was in Bordeaux. And so this bins and the numbers was a real trial, and you know, it equates to a style. So every year we're talking about Bin 389. We're talking about predominantly Cabernet with Shiraz, some, you know, give or take a little bit of percentages each year, but consistently that wine we're trying to get to it as close as possible. So we're going to lovely vineyards and regions, and all our vineyards are sustainably farmed. But areas like the Barossa Valley, which gives it the backbone and the structure. So when we think about the Barossa Valley, and you've got Coonawarra up here, which is a big component of it, these two regions bring different structures to the wine. So I'll start with Coonawarra here because it's up on the screen, but Coonawarra is a region, you know, about 5-hour drive from the winery. But you get this lovely soil structure here, which we call terroirs soil, very small block. The limestone coast, where we're starting to source more Cabernet from, produces this lovely distinct style. So it's clay with a limestone base, but what you get in the wines is you get this lovely distinct cassis flavor and this lovely elegance about the wine. And then when you go to areas like the Barossa Valley, here we've got an example of our Kalimna vineyard. So real backbone, as I was mentioning before, bringing lovely fruit forward components together. But we talk about blending. This is something that kind of is in our DNA, even when back in 1844, we're making these lovely fortifieds with the Solera system. And so an area like the Kalimna vineyard is quite diverse. You've got sandy, just even on this block that we purchased in 1945, you've got lovely sandy soils all the way to a clay base. So a lot of diversity and microclimates within some of the different vineyards as well. And a lot of people don't know that these vineyards are quite old. You know, this right here is a block 42. We have Shiraz here and we have Cabernet. We have the world's oldest continuous producing Cabernet vines in the world. These date back to the 1880s. So really quite remarkable, very, very low yields, but obviously of that high, lovely concentration that, you know, in some years we'll go into a wine like Bin 389. So, you know, diversity in regions and creating this house style and consistency is what we pride ourselves on at Penfolds. The other thing that's quite unique to Penfolds that, you know, is a good testament to us is that ageability. You know, when Max went to Bordeaux, he was tasting wines that were 30 to 40, 50 years old. So a wine like Bin 389 has that construct where it's approachability in its youth, but it's designed to age as well. So, you know, a wine like this might go, you know, I think on the notes 2023 to 2050 is what we're predicting. So, you know, we do some things at Penfolds that are quite unique. One is the Rewards of Patience, which is a guide, the Penfolds form guide, that, you know, is basically gives you a reference point. We go back and we taste the library every 5 years and write up the notes with our independent panel. And then the second thing we do that's quite unique is if you have any Penfolds red wine that's 15 years or older, you can actually take them to a clinic. We pop them up all around the world and we'll basically assess your wines for you, the ultimate in after sales service. So basically as these wines are getting older, we've got an ullage level that's kind of dropping, and you'll sit down with one of our winemakers and basically if it's steamed up to that point of danger, if you will, actually open it up, taste it alongside you, and if it's up to standard, we'll actually top it back up. If it gets to below a danger point here, more than 2%, we can't certify it. This is a complimentary service that we offer, and basically these wines are outlasting their cork. So around the world, we've recorked over 180,000 bottles globally. So, you know, only can recork once, but, you know, I think it's a good testament to the way that these wines are designed, some of the regions that we're sourcing from, and that house style that you referred to as well, Lars, around these wines.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Tim. So you mentioned American oak. We had a question come in about where that American oak was from in the U.S. Do you know that?
Yeah, so we use Quercus alba oak. So up from the Minnesota, those types of regions is where we source a lot. We have a number of different coopers that we source from at Penfolds all around the world. I mean, we pride ourselves on innovation as well. You know, things that you know, different oak treatments, whether it's different closures, all types of things. You know, Dr. Ray Beckworth in 1937 was the link between pH and bacterial spoilage. So oak is one component of that, but yeah, American oak, we have French oak that we use as well. And it really depends on that style of wine. So, you know, we have Baby Grange here, Bin 389, but, you know, an RWT, which is our Barossa Valley Shiraz, will be 100% French oak. So just depending on the style of the wine.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. That was fascinating. I love the idea, especially in these days of COVID, the idea of wine for medicinal purposes fits in perfectly.
You're telling me, get stuck into the tourneys, and I'm sure the panel's got some great wines that'll help you out with that too. So
No doubt. All right. So now we're going to move on to South America, where it's about, what is it, guys? About 2:00 in the afternoon. We're going to go to visit with Sebastian Labe, who is the chief winemaker of Santa Rita in Chile. Sebastian had some time in New Zealand as well, since we're all sharing commonalities. And Sebastian, you were named last year by the Descorchados magazine, named Winemaker of the Year 2019. And when they did that, they said that you have started a small revolution at Santa Rita. Can you tell us a little bit about what revolution you started and what have been the
Wow, that's a big compliment. Thanks, Lars, and good morning to everyone over there. Yeah, that was a great recognition last year. I think, you know, sometimes it's a bit unfair that once we take it as winemakers as the only players, you know, it's a big team supporting and to do all this. Yeah, we've been, you know, Santa Rita, it's a very traditional brand with a lot of history. We're going to talk about that in the presentation, but I'm start actually sharing now. it's basically a very traditional property that was established, in the 1880s, and we're doing some, fine tunings that I think are turning into good results. Just getting a little bit more freshness into some of the wines and trying to see more classical varieties with a different view. But yeah, Maipo Valley and Chile in general, it's about Cabernet Sauvignon and in the alluvial terraces of Maipo Valley, in this particular place in Alto Jahuel, it's Casa Real, our icon wine, what really puts the focus on everything we do here. Casa Real actually has a very classic story. This is actually the label, which is depicted actually, and the history of the royal house, the chapel, and this is actually the royal house that it's actually part of the park. And this is it's being transformed into a boutique hotel where people come and visit us and stay here and live this experience of living in or actually staying here in the alluvial terraces of Maipo Valley at the foothills on the Andes ranges. Well, this is an aerial view picture that I really like to show. This is south of the city of Santiago. For those of you that don't know, Chile is a very long and narrow country. Just in the middle of the city of Santiago, and this is just in the south. It's a 50-kilometer drive, actually, half-an-hour drive south of the Santiago. You ended up, you get to see the Alto Jahuel estate, which is basically the soul of Santa Rita. Vines have been grown, especially Cabernet Sauvignon has been grown here for over centuries, and it's a variety that I think has adapted very well to this very Mediterranean climate with the strong influence of the Andes ranges. This is something where we talk about the proximity that we have, that it's a very a different side. We're in the west side of South America tip, and the proximity of the Andes ranges has a very strong influence in the soil formations and also in terms of the climate. Cold masses of air tend to come down during the afternoons, cooling down the vineyards and create that kind of a thermic oscillation, that diurnal range, which it could be positive and negatives in many cases, but I think it produces something very unique in here. Normally, most of the different soils that you get to see in this vineyard are very complex. You get to see a lot more colluvial formations in the hillsides and a lot of deep alluvial terraces, a lot of gravelly soils in the flat areas, which is where this picture actually is located. And I think that has a strong influence in terms of vine balance and the character of this particular wine, Casa Real. And a bit of history, which I think was very intriguing. In 1880, the founder of Santa Rita, he was one of the pioneers in starting planting Bordeaux varieties, like European varieties in the upper Maipo Valley. So these varieties tend to adapt it very well to the soils. And for some time, through the experience, there were several winemakers and vineyards that were aware that there was one particular site in this big vineyard. This is a 2,000-hectare block, that aerial picture I show you. But there was one sector that actually have precisely been producing a consistency in terms of Cabernet Sauvignon with a very defined character, with a very defined aromatics and very nice structure. And this is basically how Casa Real started. The first vintage of Casa Real of this particular wine was actually in 1989. But the attempts were actually in find that particular spot during the 80s. So the grapes actually used for Casa Real since that time has always been from that particular Carneros Viejo block. And that 50-year-old Cabernet vines are able to produce something that it's very small berries and small actually bunches, very concentrated with very thick skin. And I think they can produce a Cabernet Sauvignon that it's very interesting. So Casa Real, it's a wine that we only tend to produce in exceptional vintages. So actually from 1989, we only skipped, a few years, basically through frosts or rains. We're very lucky here in Chile, I think, in terms of having very consistent vintage quality, although there are vintages that are better than others. But Mother Nature is always treating you there, and there have been vintages that we've had to skip, actually. So after all that designment and trials and errors, there was this particular block identified, and this is the origin actually of Carneros Viejo or Casa Real. So it's a single block vineyard. It's a 29-hectare block within this 2,000-hectare property with nearly 700 hectares planted of varieties, most of them devoted to Cabernet Sauvignon. What is so unique, I think, here, it's basically gravels. I think Cabernet, it's a variety that definitely gets to show better results and, you know, in free draining soils. And I think here in the flat areas, in the alluvial terraces of Maipo Valley, has really achieved a balance in terms of the vegetative growth and also in terms of the reproductive growth, where you see a very even ripening and a character that it's very, very unique. When we talk about, you know, old vines, and I think that's I really like to show and to see, you know, what a 50-year-old Cabernet vine looks in the Maipo Valley. It's a canopy that is really balanced. It's got a lot of light. I think we get some very early ripening with bunches that are really small, and I think they're the secret basically of the quality of this wine, or the character. Those small bunches allow us to do some, you know, very traditional vinification. This is made actually very handcrafted, the way I like to show it, and it's a wine that can definitely has a very good aging potential. We've been actually working with that style, that because being a very old vineyard, there is a lot of attention to details. Different muscle selections of Cabernet have been identified, and actually we all have them separated. There's a lot of actually testing in terms of flowering times, veraison, kind of bunches, the size of the bunches and the character of the wines. And now there's a lot of actually identification of plant to plant. A lot of hand growth, and hand crafting of this particular wine, in terms of sorting, in terms of the fermentation, everything. It's kind of fermented very traditional. We use actually wooden beds and also concrete to actually craft this. In terms of the aging, it's very traditional, but I think that something that really produces that is to maintain the essence of one particular block of Cabernet Sauvignon in Alto Jawel, and in a wine basically that we have been making exactly the same wine for over, you know, nearly 30 years now. And I think that's the essence of this. In terms of bottle aging, we're kind of very restricting in terms of when releasing the wine to the public. It's a wine that we like to keep actually for an extra year, normally in bottles after bottlings, before getting the wine into the market. Now, currently we're selling the 2017 vintage, which is what is out in the market right now. And Casa Real, it's basically a wine that it's made to drink now, but it's a wine that can age actually beautiful in terms of to show the character of how Cabernets tend to be here. One of the things I like to normally to describe with Casa Real, it's that style, which is very European influenced, but with a Chilean prism. I think it's basically the view of how that variety Cabernet Sauvignon has adapted very well to the flat areas of this this place, producing a wine that it's kind of robust and it has the intensity and some really sweet kind of sensation in the tannins, but it's a wine that has a very good aging potential. Normally with diurnal range, which is something I like to talk a lot, the influence of the Pacific, of the Andes ranges, cold masses of air cooling down the vineyards, sometimes get that little hint of those cedary notes or leafy notes that I think they are kind of the essence of this wine. You cannot just normally spot it up. It's a Maipo character and an Alto Jawel character we have very, very clear. And I think this is something we want to show into the wine. It's a very precise and hand-off winemaking with a lot of attention that we do in terms of vineyard selections and balance of that. So yeah, this is our icon, our greatest Cabernet Sauvignon, grown here in the Maipo Valley, and Casa Real is the one that has been with us and traveling, with the essence of Santa Rita throughout the world, and we're very, devoted to this particular old vine Cabernet.
Fantastic, and you even did that with 30 seconds to spare.
Thank you. I turned it later on.
I appreciate that very much. Beautiful, beautiful. As one of our viewers said, mind-blowing story about the Casa Real and what's going on in some parts of Chile. So thank you very much, Sebastian. And next, speaking about mind-blowing, we see different winemakers traveling to different parts of the world from their native areas, and that's kind of fun. And I've been fortunate enough to travel in South America and know what we always thought. I learned a lot about Argentine wines and a lot about Chilean wines. I learned a lot about Peruvian cuisine. In South America, the best chefs, they say, always come from Peru. But Luis Gomez is bent on changing our impression about wines of Peru. So Luis, as a native Argentine, tell us what you found in Peru.
Hi, Lars. Thank you for this opportunity. I have been here in Peru since 2019, and I share the presentation to you.
Great.
Okay. The Queiroz family has more than 100 years of experience here in Peru. They arrived from Italy in 1877, and the winery was founded in 1880. Then in 1960s, the second generation of the family decided to move the vineyard to the south of Lima in Cañete Valley. And then in 2002, the third generation of the family decided the complete renovation of the winery and the vineyard, acquired the Ica estate in the south of Peru. Then in 2008, the Intipalca wines were launched to the Peruvian market. And finally, in 2019, I joined to the company as main winemaker and Alejandro Sejanovic as consultant. Currently, we produce more than 10 million bottles a year, and we export to USA and Europe. If we talk about Peru, Peru is a big country with a lot of geographic areas. Here we have a rainforest, there are the Andes Mountains, and there is a large coastline with coastal desert. There are two geographic characteristics with a big influence on the terroir in the south of Peru. The first is the Andes Mountains, like South America. But in this case, the Andes Mountain prevents the rain from the west, from the rainforest. And the second, the most important, is the Peru current in the Pacific Ocean. This marine current, or Humboldt current, causes that the cold water from the bottom of the sea rise to the surface. But what is the importance of this marine current or about the terroir? With this cold water on the surface, there is not evaporation. So the climate in the south of Peru is dry, is arid, and the most important, with temperature lower than the normal according to the latitude. Remember that the climate of Peru should be tropical, but in the case of the south of Peru is the opposite, especially in the Ica Valley. Here we have a map of the city of Lima. Lima is in the center of the country, 150 kilometers to the south. There is the Cañete Valley. Here we have a small vineyard, less than 100 hectares, close to the sea, and 300 kilometers to the south, there is the Ica Valley, with our biggest vineyard, with more than 600 hectares. About the Ica Valley. Ica Valley is a big valley in the south of Peru, and the valley is between the Andes Mountains and this big coastal desert with big dunes, big dunes. And the distance between the valley and the Pacific Ocean is less than 50 kilometers. So the maritime influence on the valley is nil. Here's the Ica Valley. And the Ica Valley is created by the Ica River. And the water of the Ica River are born in the Andes mountain. Inside of the Queirolo, inside of the Ica Valley, we have our vineyard, and all our vineyards are irrigated by the water of Ica River with the drip irrigation. If we talk about the climate of the valley, there are 4 important characteristics with a big influence on the terroir. The first, the rains. The rains are less than 20 millimeters a year. It's a desert. We have a high thermal amplitude. In several cases, close to the 20 Celsius degrees between the day and the night. We have a high sun radiation, and we have more than 300 sunny days a year. Our wines, the name of our wine is Intibalga. Intibalga means Sun Valley for this reason. These 4 points determine excellent condition for the grape growth with a complete maturation and high concentration, especially in the red grapes. Inside of the vineyard, we have 2 different growing areas. The first is the mountains, in the mountainside, with an altitude of 500 meters above the sea level, with rocky and calcareous soil poor in organic matter. With this condition, the vineyard have less vigor, less production, but high concentration. And additionally, in this part of the mountains, we receive high exposure to the sunlight. So the grape have more sugar concentration and more polyphenols. So the wines made with this grape have more alcohol and more color, more structure. Here we have some varieties as Tanat, Petit Verdot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and a little of Sauvignon Blanc too. The second part of the vineyard we call the flat vineyard. Here we have a deep soil with a lot of sun because it's a desert. In some part we have silt, clay, because the origin of the soil in the valley is alluvial. And here the vineyard have a medium vigor with a good production, and the wines made with this grape have a good balance between the alcohol and the acidity. And for me, the most important is the typicity of the variety in the wine. Here we have Malbec, Tanat, Syrah, Merlot, Chardonnay, and Sauvignon Blanc too.
Great.
Finally, I will describe this wine. The name of the wine is Intipalca #1, and the vintage is 2018. And this wine is made with the best of the vintage. In this case, it's a blend between Malbec and Tanat. In my opinion, the best varieties in the valley. The grape for this wine were picked by hand. The fermentation process was took in place in stainless steel tank for 15 days. And after the fermentation, we left the skin in maceration for 25 days. And after that, we moved the wine to the barrel. We use new barrel, French oak barrel, for 100% of the blend for 1 year. After the year, we taste barrel by barrel, and we made the blend. And after the blending, we put the wine into the bottle without filtration. If we taste this wine, you can see a deep red color, note of in the nose, note of coffee, vanilla, in the mouth, high concentration, sweet tannin for the Panat and the Malbec, and long finish. I am Argentinian, and for me, this is the wine for the meat. No? This vintage is recently in the market. Maybe if you can wait, I prefer to open next year.
Well,
Yes. Thank you very much. Here are our wines. I wait your question.
beautiful, Luis. Thank you. That was fascinating. Mind officially blown. Those vineyards look like an oasis in the desert, and the wine is absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful, deep fruit, elegant, fantastic. So we're going to stay in South America now. We're going to go to a place we're maybe a little more familiar with, Argentina. And David Bonomi, who is the chief winemaker for Bodega Norton. David was born in Mendoza from an Italian immigrant family. And was last year, he was rated one of the top 10 winemakers of South America by Decanter. So tell us how you got that, made those bones there, David.
Thank you, Lars. Good afternoon. I am in Mendoza today. It's a pretty day, very sunny and okay. I present a little part of our history, our Norton history and my history. I am the third generation in my family because my origin family is from Italy, from the north of Italy, from Torino. And I produce wines in the same condition with my fathers and the same condition from many years ago with my grandfather. I am the third generation in Argentina that produce wines. And okay, I share our Norton condition today. This is one of the most largest winery in Argentina. Is in the top 5, but Norton, one of the oldest winery that produce for many years wines in Mendoza. Norton is in a very special place because this is our location in Argentina, but Mendoza, you can see, is in the west part of our country. Argentina is a very large country, but all the condition that produce wines is in the foot of the Andes, the most important. Mendoza is one of the largest provinces, the largest province that produce wines in Argentina. More than 75% of the production is from Mendoza. And Norton is in this place, our special terroir, because there are 3 important conditions for me. The climate is very important in our production. The second condition is the soil. The soil in the foot of the Andes is completely different. There are many different options that I can decide. What is the third condition is the varietals. The varietal is one of the most important key to open the terroir. And in the umbrella is the expertise. This is the reason that when mentioned, our history is very important. Our family, our history, our experience in Argentina is one of the most important key to open the new terroir. Norton is very traditional winery, but in the last year started to move a lot to go up to different places. You can see the altitude. One of the most important today in our condition to explain our wines on our style is the altitude. You can see Tuscany, Barossa, Napa, but Mendoza is a very big condition that started to produce. And between 3,000 feet up to more than 6,000. And this is one of the most exciting condition that Argentina has today. And the other condition is our rainfall, because it's very dry, because the Andes is a wall, no, that separates to Chile and supports all the humidity condition that the Pacific Ocean. And Mendoza is nothing. No, this is the condition that in Mendoza need to add water in drip irrigation or flat irrigation. No, the old vineyards continues to use flat irrigation, but the new vineyards and in the top of the Andes, no, in the most special place that called Uco Valley, use now drip irrigation too, because it's very difficult today. The new climate change condition. There are low snow in our Andes and reduce this condition that to acquire water in a better capacity. No? And this is one of the most important things you can see. This is our Andes, no? To divide to Chile. In this case, in Chile, you can see more green color, but in the Andes, up to Mendoza or Argentina, up to near to the middle of our country, you can see very gray color. This is the condition that the desert climates move a different place that to planted different varieties. No, the Andes is the wall. This is the real condition that when study the climate condition, is impossible to separate the Andes for us. And again, the glacier, the water, the river. In Mendoza, there are three important rivers: Mendoza River, Tunuyán River, and Diamante River in the south. And this is the oasis, no? That this is only the condition that to planted vineyards and development this activity. And Norton, what is Norton? Norton is founded that James Edmund Palmer Norton is an engineer that's founded Norton approximately 125 years ago. He's Englishman that built all the railway that connects Mendoza to Santiago de Chile, and he fall in love with a Mendocinian girl, and then continues the activity and build or made your family. No? But Gernot Langes Sarowski in 1989 bought this property, and his son continues and is my boss today, and put a lot of new energy that maintain Norton in a very good life. And this is our vineyards in Mendoza, in Luján de Cuyo. This is our most important vineyard, Lulunta, Pedriel, Agrelo, and La Colonia. Medrano is in the east, but today I show Malbec. This is our heart, no? In this care, the most important Malbec that Norton produce is a very special because use a little part of these conditions, all vines in Luján de Cuyo, but in this is our Malbec. This is Uco Valley. In the first pictures I show Luján de Cuyo, but in this case it's Uco Valley. There are different components in the soil and different altitude, and produce very important wines in different places, no? In Los Chacayes, in Guatallarí, in La Consulta. This is the condition that move our style to more powerful in the nose, more powerful in the aromas, because the altitude provide more fixed skin. And the skin in Malbec produce more expression, no? And this is the most important key in Uco Valley. But in Luján de Cuyo, the traditional area that Norton based the winery, this is more clay soil, and the clay soil provide more soft tannin. No, this is our Malbec. This is a blend between 50% from Uco Valley and 50% that's Luján de Cuyo. And this is the different type of soil that the Uco Valley has. The most important, if you can see El Peral, in this case, is more similar than the Luján de Cuyo, but the other place is very, very different. No, when you move no more than nothing in our vineyards, 100 meters, move the soil, absolutely, because the alluvial soils, the condition that the alluvial soils in the Andes is important. No, there are different deposits. No, and the last wine that I can present is our Privada. Our Privada family blend is a typical Mendocinian blend, no Bordeaux blend. The varietal that used in this blend is Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot. This is our one of the most oldest vineyard that Norton has. Is around this place, around Pedriel, that is located. The winery is a very special wine for us, because when Sarowski family bought the winery, produced these wines only from the family, no, and his friends. And after that, for many, many years, after these conditions, started to put in the market. And this is one of the most balanced wines in the nose, because it's no terroir. This is, in the case, this is the expertise that terroir between our heritage, no? And this wine is aging for approximately 14 or 16 months in barrels, but the most important is the capacity to age these wines in bottles, no? This is one of the most important conditions, no? Mendoza has a very healthy, very sustainable conditions. Our heart is Malbec, our minds is our Privada family blend, because there are moved to two different expressions, no? Pure, in the condition that Malbec, very easy, because one of the most important variety that showed in the last 20 years was Malbec, no? Today, Malbecs extend, and the reason was Mendoza, no? That putting the focus in many, many different consumers today, and adapted very easy from different climate conditions and different soil. This is one of the most important key that Argentina open our exportation from different places with Malbec.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. David.
Thank you.
I'm really glad the Savarsky family decided to share that wine with us as well, rather than just keeping it for their family and friends. I feel like a family and friend. So that was wonderful, beautiful wine, very elegant label too. So now we're going to stay in Argentina. We're going to speak with Juan Pablo Murgia, who's a Mendoza native. His father was a viticulturist, so he grew up in vineyards and learned the importance of high quality grapes there. He's worked in Napa, Amador County, Bordeaux, and Uruguay. And he now runs Grupo Avinea. And Juan Pablo, I understand one of the important things you've done with the Grupo there and with Argento is a conversion to organics. So please tell us about that, and tell us more about your terroir there and how it translates into the glass.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lars. Thank you, everyone, the audience, for this space. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of Argento. I'm going to show the presentation. If you can check on that. So a little bit of Bodega Argento. Well, David explained you a little bit, but just to put you in the map to everyone, we are in Argentina. Argentina is a very large country. We have different regions all over the country, especially on the west side. But the most important region, at least in terms of volume, it's in the center west. Mendoza and San Juan, especially Mendoza, is approximately 70-75% of the whole country production is there. So focus on Argento. Before I jump into explain where Argento is, of the place where we are. This is kind of a zoom on Mendoza, on our region. The rounded eights are our 5 vineyards. On the left, you can see this is Uco Valley. This is our Altamira vineyard. And then we have Ugarteche vineyard, Agrelo vineyard. High Agrelo actually is the upper side of Agrelo. This is at the feet of the Andes. And then the Medrano and the Cruz de Piedra vineyard. Now, approximately, we are producing about almost 500 hectares of our own vineyards for our projects. And we have a program of producers. But before we jump into the vineyards and show you some pictures about these amazing places, I want to explain a little bit about our what you ask, Lars, that it's that our journey into this philosophy, this organic and natural philosophy. Argento was launched about 25 years by the late 90s. What Malbec is, and especially to show freshness and purity, and that is what Malbec is, you know, fresh fruit, and it's a very good way to show our place, and we keep doing that with Malbec. But by the year 2009 and 10 approximately, we started to plant our own vineyards, and was there when we decided to turn a little bit of our idea, our concept. And the idea was to go back to the traditional way of management, to a natural way of management, like in the old days, like our grandparents. I come from a family, a winemaking family from the beginning of the last century, and that way of management, of the vineyard management, was to be very natural and environmental care, especially focus on the soil, and especially, you know, talking about chemical synthesis products. So we decided to start managing our vineyards in a natural way. As I said before, focus on the soil, trying to come back again to the salt movement, to work with the chisel, to decompact the soil, to add organic material, organic manure, because we believe that this is the best way to express the terroir where our vineyards are located. You know, as you know well, terroir is different, you know, factors, and one of the soil and to express what the soil has to give you is to work on the roots and to make them explore and to care your soils, you know, to make them healthier. And so this way of management started to become organic with the time, because we have to make that in some way official. So we move into organic. It was very easy for us to move into organic because we were doing that since the beginning. And so our main vineyard, our largest vineyard that is of course organic, is located in High Agrelo. This is a 230 hectares. You can see on the map the different region of the Northwest region. This is not Uco Valley included there. So you can see on the upper side where is High Agrelo. Sorry, there is something here. So this is a beautiful picture of what it looks like. Of course, we decided to make something special in this vineyard. And the first we did was to explore on the soil, because we understood that all this big vineyard, 230 hectares of vineyards, was not the same. All the vineyard was different in different blocks. So we did a deep scientific research there. One of part of the system was electrical conductivity. If you can see there, this map, this has to be with some different colors. So the blue ones are more stony soils. The yellow one has less stone and more clay composition, and the black lines are the small channels. This is a very deep slope. There is a 200 distance between the upper and the lower size of this vineyard. So we did, after this is a first picture of the vineyard, but then we did all these small dots that you can see there, and are all different soil pits. We call them calicata. So we explore all the vineyard. We did at least 500 calicatas in all the vineyard. So we can describe the soil, so we can classify this vineyard in terms of the soil composition, in terms of the texture. So after this texture, we decided to select a specific rootstock for each kind of soil. And we decided to manage with an individual irrigation operation, because this, of course, is drop irrigation. And we have a special management for each block, and we classified it. And we decided what grape was going to go in there. That is mainly Malbec, but we have Petit Verdot, we have Cap Franc, we have Syrah, Chardonnay, Semillon, and all these blocks and all these grapes and rootstocks has different needs of irrigation. So we classified all these vineyards in different colors. The light blue ones are the most stony composition. We have up to 90% of stones in the soil composition. Then we have the green one and the red one that has more clay or sand composition. And of course, we have different results on the profile of the wines. Some of the wines are more red fruity, some are more dark fruit, some are more spicy, and of course we have different textures of tannin. So we classify the whole vineyard and put it in different types of wines. And of course, this is, if you can see from there, this is a typical soil profile of High Agrelo. High Agrelo is 1,100 meters above the sea level. So, and this is on the feet of the Andes. And of course, this is a typical alluvional soil formation. We have a lot of stones there. Some of them are, has some limestone, some calcium carbonate. And this specific vineyard gave us a very special character on our wines. I'm having right now our Agrelo Cap Franc. We've been pushing Cap Franc because we believe is one of the most interesting varieties here in Mendoza. Of course, we are Malbec producers, but we decided to push the Cap Franc, and we understood that this Agrelo vineyard was the best place to develop this Cap Franc, and this grape really liked this place and helped us to develop this spicy note with, at the same time, with this red fruit, and of course this very texture tannins that make this wine so juicy and enjoyable. Well, of course, we've been developing our single vineyard program from this vineyard. We have some of the single vineyard from the Altamira vineyard, but some of the Agrelo, the Malbec one and the Cap Franc. So the end of the story, we have seen that this organic way of management really helped us to develop and to push the terroir flavors. So we're gonna keep doing it that way, and of course by next year, 430 hectares of organic being certified. This is maybe one of the largest or the largest organic producer in Argentina right now. So we're very proud of that. And
Fantastic. Okay, Juan Pablo. Thank you very much. That was, again, another learning curve, the idea of Cabernet Franc coming out of Argentina. Of course, great admiration for the organic program. That seems to be the way of the world. And what's nice is that there's great wines coming out of organic vineyards. So I'm going to ask you to take your screen share down.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Pablo. And now we're going to go to end the day at the end of the day, where it's about 8 p.m. there, right, Johan?
Absolutely, it's 8:10.
Down in Stellenbosch. Johan Reineke, the owner of Reineke Organic. He's taken things almost one step past organic and become South Africa's first biodynamic vineyard and winery. He's a surfer, a self-admitted vine hugger, and has also been leading the way with some wonderful social programs for his worker families. So Johan, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about what's going on these days in your corner of the world in South Africa.
Hi, Lars. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. And the wine I'm going to present tonight, or the wine in my glass, is a Reineke Terroir. As you can see, it's a 2016 vintage. It's certified organic and biodynamic. And South Africa doesn't have organic standards, so we had it certified to EU standards and also NOP for America and the Canadian market. But my story, let's talk a little bit about the wine before you start the loop, and then I'll tell the story behind the wine.
Great. You tell me when you're ready for the loop.
Thanks, man. So for those of you who don't know, but South Africa is right on the bottom tip of Africa. And if you go right to the bottom of South Africa, where the Indian and Atlantic Oceans meet, you get the Western Cape. And we have an amazingly beautiful mountain called Table Mountain. And the city is Cape Town. If you haven't come for a visit, please do. It's a beautiful city. It's very cosmopolitan. It's just lovely. The mountain literally drops into the ocean. It's beautiful. A lot of nature, a lot of wilderness. Great for surfing, diving, for ocean lovers, good food, good wine. And if you drive from Cape Town I would say about half an hour, 40 minutes, along the coast of the Indian Ocean, more or less, past False Bay, you get the old historic town of Stellenbosch. And I'm now in Stellenbosch, and I sit here on granitic outcrop, granite soil, some of the oldest, most extensively weathered vineyard soil anywhere in the world. It's getting a little bit dark. I just had to look out the window to see if my cows, otherwise I would have had to excuse myself and rush to get them in, but they're in. And if I look down to the left, I see the beautiful town of Stellenbosch. If I look sort of to the right, I see False Bay. Those of you into sharks, there's a lot of white shark activity in False Bay. And if I look over my shoulder at the back here, I see Table Mountain, in the distance, to give you a sort of a sense of place. The specific wine we're tasting, the Terroir, I think South Africa, it's kind of interesting. If you look at the world of wine, you'd probably have Australia and France sort of almost as opposites, or as the ends of the spectrum, climatically speaking. And then kind of step in from Australia, maybe California, I'm not so sure, and from France, some other European climes. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you kind of move to the middle, you find South Africa as a growing region. So it's quite a diverse region, and depending on where you grow your grapes and where you live, it's going to have a more New World expression or a more Old World expression. So our specific site, I would say, is more Old World, and it's like that for a few reasons. The one is the granite soils. The second one is the altitude. It doesn't sound very high. It's between 100 and 300 meters above sea level. But what makes a difference is its proximity to the ocean. So if you stand in the vineyards, you can see False Bay. It's about 14 kilometers away. I'm not sure how many miles those are. And obviously, I don't want to repeat a theme, but the cold sea breeze really does have an effect on the growing conditions of the vines. And it kind of lends to more cooler climate expression of the South African spectrum. So the specific Terroir to me at least, when I opened it earlier when we started, had beautiful perfumey notes, a lot of rose petals, violets, and then I sort of got a hint of aniseed and maybe licorice, and now it's become almost like a savory notes coming through the wine. Very elegant, almost like a feminine expression of the cultivar, until you put it in your mouth, which I've done a few times now as well. And then you realize that you live on granite soils. So it's got a proper structure. It's got that dry finish. It's definitely good for a leg of lamb. But, you know, I think most importantly is that all wines, as these amazing panelists have just described, have a sense of place and a story to tell. It's not Coca-Cola. We don't make it from a recipe. The idea is to interfere as little as possible and to just let the wine tell the story of the farm. So for those of you who don't have a glass in front of you, I would love to share as much of the farm as I possibly can in the time I have left. Last year, you're welcome to start looping at any time, but I think I only have about 5 pictures on there, so I leave it up to discretion. But my story is a funny one, man. I'm not a qualified or a trained viticulturalist or an oenologist or anything like that. I started off studying law. I sucked at it. I fell in love with philosophy. I did a degree in environmental ethics. I focused in particular on the relationship between environment and development. And at the same time, I was also in love with a girl who got a job as an au pair in Pasadena and Los Angeles. And 3 months after she left, I couldn't wait any longer. So I bought myself a ticket and I spent a year in the States following the love of my life, who I ended up marrying. But when I came back, you know, I had to find a job. My parents said, you know, if you're old enough to do things like that, you're old enough to stand on your own feet. I couldn't resume my studies immediately. And my hair had actually grown incredibly long and made dreads in San Francisco. So back in the day, South Africa was quite a conservative society. I couldn't get a job as a waiter, and I got a job as a farm laborer. That's actually a beautiful picture that you've got there of all my colleagues. We were a team. We worked in the vineyards. We struggled to survive, and we decided we wanted to start our own wine business, our own wine company. That's a story for another day. It's called the Cornerstone Project. But what it does today is it helps kids who were previously disadvantaged with university education. It helps our employees who were excluded from the economy because of apartheid with the bonds on their houses. And you can't change the past, but you can learn from it and you know, try and make the future better. What did happen though, and what I really do want to mention is, I think my studies in the evenings, you know, if you read stuff, if I think of America, I think of Aldo Leopold, and I think of Thoreau on Walden Pond. You know, you can't just conveniently forget what you read in the evenings. I think with knowledge comes obligation. And I really felt compelled to farm in a more environmentally friendly way. But at the same time, I was a farm laborer, and working with chemicals and things also didn't sit so well with me. So we started farming organically. I failed dismally. I understood organics as just no herbicides or pesticides or fungicides. Today, I know it's much more complicated than that. I know that we farm with vines in the short term and with soil in the long term, and that farmers don't use chemicals because they want to, but because they have to. So we've had to discover alternative remedies to put in place. And what we're also certified at is biodynamics, which is unfortunately often referred to as the voodoo of viticulture, due to the preparations and the biodynamic calendar. But to me, the most amazing thing about biodynamics is that it shifts the needle from being purely sustainable to being self-sufficient. So, you know, even when I farmed organically, I still had a lot of waste on the farm. If I made wine, I had all the pips and the stems and the skins, and I didn't know what to do with them. Same with my cows. You know, if you just farm with them, you have a buildup of manure and very high nitrogen levels in certain areas of the farm. But the moment you farm with both, the problem disappears. You feed the waste from the cows to the vineyards, and you take the waste from the wine cellar and you feed this back to the cows. And it's really given us here on the southern tip of Africa an amazing opportunity to survive. Agriculture is often dominated by a few big multinationals. They're definitely not interested in our South African rands. It's worth a little bit more than monopoly money. And we can't afford to keep on paying in dollars and pounds and euros because our currency is weakening every year. So my cow manure costs the same. We collect it every weekend. We make compost. Our intervention is absolutely minimal. And I would like to sort of end off because I see my time is virtually up. I can't believe it. I just want to leave everyone with a thought. I never set out to create a business. I'm not a businessman. I didn't choose this life. It just kind of happened. And I like to see this farm as a place of opportunity. And I don't know if you guys have read Life of Pi. It's unfortunately not in the book. I mean, it's not in the movie. So if you watch the movie, you won't see it. But if you read the book, the little boy walks to school every day and he walks through an arch. And on the arch, it says, Nil magnum nisi bonum. And that means there can be no greatness without goodness. And I take that to heart. I think we live in a time today where we all want to be good. We want to be successful. We want to be famous. We want to make money. But we can't afford to do so at the cost of each other or at the cost of the natural environment. So Reineke Wines for me has become a home for nature to flourish and also for people to do so. So I think my time is up unless I've checked my timer wrong. But you can correct me, Lars. But I think that's me, man, as quick as I can be. Can I go still? Okay.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you. Lars's computer actually just died on him, so he's trying to pop back on right now. He's actually trying to get on in a minute, so he'll be on in a second. But in the meantime, he did want to do a quick roundabout for all of the panelists today, which again, thank you so much for giving us all of this amazing information and showing us the beautiful images that you have. It was really exciting and really awesome for everyone to see and hear. So if everyone could go around in 20 words or less and just tell us what the period is of your harvest and then how your 2020 harvest went. So
I'm back, by the way, Shelby. I managed to get it back
okay,
together.
good.
So
All right,
I'm
well, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, you heard the directive. So let's go around. There's some curiosity because of the Southern Hemisphere. We want to know what the period of your harvest usually is. I imagine everybody's going to be a little bit different, but clearly in the spring. And you've all had 2020 done, and we understand that there were challenges. You were all harvesting at the very start of COVID, but give us a real, as we say in New York, the elevator pitch, the real short version of what the 2020 seems to look like to you. Very short. Let's start with Julian, please.
Yeah, harvest dates last week of February through to the first week of April there, Lars. And 2020 would be one of the best vintages in living memory. Very dry, very warm for New Zealand. So extremely excited.
Awesome. Tim?
Yeah, I mean, we're late February through May. Obviously, it was a challenging year with the fires, I would say, in Australia. Probably some of the Chardonnay affected, but what we didn't, we're pretty lucky at Penfolds. So what we did pick, small yields, but the yields are showing great quality early on and little to no smoke taint. So exciting.
Good to hear. Sebastian?
Yeah, well, our harvest goes actually from February to April. We're just starting to have a few things in January, especially some Chardonnays from up in the north. And yeah, 2020 was a great year, a hot vintage, warm year, and now we're in the fruits are just flowering, it's finished. So we're looking for a great vintage again.
Fantastic. Luis, how about at Intipalca in Peru?
Intipalca, maybe the beginning of the January to the end of the April, because
okay,
this more we have more hot climate here, we start with in the beginning of the year.
Fantastic. And 2020 looks to be decent for you?
Yeah, it was a great harvest for us. More concentration because the climate was very, very hot here.
Okay, great. And David Bonomi?
Absolutely nice vintage. I compare with 2019 is different because it's more warm climates in that year, but it started to peak very earlier and very nice because finished very earlier. In this year was the first winter that Norton finished the harvest in March, no, and I compare with very old vintage that Norton had in our cellars, similar to 1974. Was absolutely incredible wines that produced in that time. And okay, I repeat a very nice vintage in compare with very old vintage, no, but.
Okay.
Very close, no, but introduce all the grapes in a very short times.
Fantastic. Juan Pablo, when was your harvest period and how was 2020 looking?
Well, 2020, I agree with David. For me personally, it was one of the best I ever seen in Mendoza. It was very early. It was kind of a record. We pick up in Agrelo by the end of February. That's white grapes season, and we did it for Malbec and from some Cab Franc. So that was crazy. 42 days of anticipation, and well, February was one of the warmer of the last 50 years. So, but in terms of quality, very high concentrations of polyphenols, but at the same time, and good alcohol level, but keeping acidity. That's a combination all winemakers look for, and it happened naturally. So I think it's well, the wines are going to be released maybe next year, but we're going to remember as one of the best harvests of the last decades.
Wow. All right. And Johan, I know you got to get those cows in, but give us an idea of when your normal harvest period is in South Africa and what 2020 looked like.
Well, the good news is the cows are in. I checked through the window. I'm going to double sure now. So we start harvesting end of Jan, probably Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
And then we do Cab Franc, Merlot, March, and February, sorry, and then sort of Syrah, and then end up with Cabernet Sauvignon in March. The year for us was actually a very cool one. Quite cold in the evenings. You wouldn't believe it now because I'm sitting here with a t-shirt, but I think you saw Julian also was dressed warm. In the evenings it's a lot colder than in the middle of the day. Yeah. It was a very challenging one as well. We had a lot of mildew pressure, moist and wet conditions. It will definitely separate the men from the boys. Timing was everything, but if you got it right, it's going to be a very good one.
Good. Well, overall, we need something good to come out of 2020, and hopefully it's some delicious wine from that vintage. So thank you guys all from all corners of the Southern Hemisphere, and thank all of those who tuned in today. We had a very nice receptive audience, wonderful comments. Remember to get your commentary, your brief synopsis of today's webinar to me, lars@somjournal.com. And the first 5 people who do that will get a copy of our beautiful Sotheby's New Wine Encyclopedia. So thank you again to the Somm Journal, to SommCon, and to National Geographic. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a great weekend, and happy holidays. We'll talk to you very soon. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Salud.
Cheers.